Imagine a world where the most famous, heavily armed military general of the era is brought down not by a rival army, but by a lone woman wielding domestic camping equipment.
Right. Just a tent peg.
Literally a tent peg. And imagine a society that attempts to solve a horrific civil war, not through diplomacy, but through a coordinated campaign of mass kidnapping.
It sounds like complete fiction.
It really does. I mean, you might think this is the plot of some dystopian post-apocalyptic movie, but you specifically asked us to look into this.
Yeah, you sent us this massive academic manuscript.
Exactly. It's this incredibly detailed survey called Ziverlo's 7 Survey of Judges.docs by Chris Arvelasis, and you sent it because you wanted to know how societies fall apart.
Which is a heavy topic, to be fair.
Oh, absolutely. Well, we've spent all week poring over these pages.
Yeah.
We've been pulling in threads from archaeology, historical data, Bible Odyssey, the Encyclopedia Britannica.
And honestly, what we found is terrifying.
Terrifying is the word. The truth of the Book of Judges is darker, more violent, and far more complex than anything Hollywood could invent.
It really is. I mean, when you read this text without the filter of, children's Sunday school stories, it is genuinely shocking.
Totally.
We are looking at a society in free fall. It's this creeping realization that the foundation of a culture isn't just cracking, it is practically dust.
You fix one leak and 3 more spring up.
Right. You hire a new leader to solve a crisis, and that leader ends up becoming a tyrant who is actually worse than the initial problem.
Yeah.
So what we are exploring for you today is the absolute anatomy of a national, social, and spiritual collapse.
And to do that, we need to completely toss out the flannel graph versions of these stories.
Oh, for sure.
The regions where Gideon and Samson are pitched as these flawless ancient superheroes. Because when you dive into the historical and cultural reality laid out in this research, you realize this isn't a scrapbook of heroic legends.
Well, not at all.
It is a grueling look at what happens when an entire culture decides to do what is right in its own eyes.
Which is the defining phrase of the whole text.
Exactly. But to actually understand how they got to that point of total moral anarchy, we have to start with the ground they were standing on. We need to set the historical stage.
Right. Context is everything here.
So we are talking about the period roughly between 1200 and 1020 BCE.
Which is an incredibly volatile window of time. Historians refer to the era just before this as the Late Bronze Age.
Okay.
And the end of that age was marked by a massive, catastrophic collapse across the entire Mediterranean and the ancient Near East.
Let me pause you right there, because collapse is a big word.
It is.
What does that actually look like on the ground? I mean, did everyone just wake up one day and the empires were gone?
Well, no, not overnight, but surprisingly fast in the grand scheme of history. Think about it like a domino effect in a highly globalized economy.
Okay, I can picture that.
You had this severe disruption of major maritime trade routes, and that was partly due to mysterious seafaring raiders known as the Sea Peoples.
Right, the Sea Peoples.
Yeah, combined with severe climate shifts and droughts. So the massive, entrenched Canaanite city-states, which relied on those trade routes to fund their elite chariot armies and complex administrations, they suddenly went bankrupt.
Wow, so the money just dries up.
Exactly. The centralized power structure is essentially hollowed out. And into that massive geopolitical power vacuum, we see the growth of these small, decentralized highland settlements.
Which is early Israel.
Yes, this is early Israel.
So they aren't just moving into a pristine, empty landscape. They are scratching out a living in the rocky hill country, while the burning embers of these old empires are still smoldering in the valleys.
That's a great way to put it.
And the way they lived is fascinating. The research details this early Iron Age society as deeply kinship-based and agrarian.
Extremely agrarian, yeah.
The archaeology points heavily to these structures called four-room houses. Break that down for us. Why does the floor plan of an ancient house matter to the story of Judges?
Because architecture always reflects sociology. Always.
Oh, interesting.
When archaeologists dig up these four-room houses in the Central Hill Country, they aren't finding isolated single-family dwellings like a modern suburban home.
Right.
These were pillared structures designed for extended families. They were all living together alongside their livestock on the ground floor.
Wait, with the animals inside?
Yes, on the ground floor for heat and security. And inside, they find heavy grinding stones and loom weights.
Meaning they were making their own flour and their own clothes.
Exactly. It indicates total domestic production. The household, or the Bet Ab, which means the house of the father, was the primary economic engine.
It was their whole world.
It was the fundamental unit of identity.
Yeah.
In this world, you didn't survive as a rugged individualist. You survived because you were embedded in an extended family, a clan, and a tribe.
So it's all about community survival.
Very much so.
Mm.
It was a world governed by strict patronage and intense honor-shame dynamics. If your clan was dishonored, you were dishonored.
And they were incredibly vulnerable up there. I mean, they are up in the hills trying to farm, but the geopolitical reality is pressing in on all sides.
Oh, absolutely.
You have Moabites and Midianites raiding from the east, but the real heavyweight champions of this era are the Philistines.
Yes, the Philistines.
The research shows the Philistines are settling on the southern coastal plain at the exact same time, and they are not just another hill tribe.
Not at all. The Philistines represent a massive cultural, economic, and military disparity.
How so?
Well, the archaeological evidence shows they possess this distinctive bichrome pottery.
Bichrome, meaning two colors.
Exactly, pottery painted in two colors. And that reveals a highly sophisticated hybrid Asian Canaanite culture.
Mm.
But more importantly, they controlled the fertile lowlands.
It's a good farming land.
Right, the coastal plains. And crucially, this is the big one, they had a near monopoly on ironworking technology.
Oh, wow. Which means, while the Israelites are trying to plow a rocky field with a bronze tip or a wooden stick, the Philistines are fielding highly equipped iron-armed infantries.
Yes, it's a severe power imbalance.
It is. And to fully grasp the despair of this era, I feel like you have to contrast it with what came right before it.
Definitely.
In the canonical timeline, Judges comes immediately after the book of Joshua, and Joshua is a book of conquest.
Right, it's very triumphant.
It presents the possession of the land as a miraculous gift, the fulfillment of an ancient promise. The narrative there feels organized, decisive, and victorious.
It really does.
It's like a highly successful corporate merger. You know, everything goes according to plan, the leadership is unified, the vision is executed.
I like that analogy.
But then you turn the page to Judges, and the entire structure has evaporated. The merger failed.
Completely failed.
It's suddenly a fragile, chaotic gig economy where everyone is just trying to survive in the hills, while the big monopolies, the Philistines and the remaining Canaanite warlords, control the supply chains in the valleys.
That is the perfect way to visualize it. The centralized authority is gone. The authority we see in Judges is strictly local, episodic, and charismatic. And what is so compelling about the manuscript you provided is how it highlights the role of modern archaeology in validating this picture.
Right, because we aren't finding perfectly preserved signs with their names on them.
No, we haven't dug up a nameplate that says Gideon slept here, but the excavations perfectly validate the social geography of the text.
Like the ruins of Hazor.
Hazor is a prime example. Hazor was a massive Canaanite urban center in the Upper Galilee.
And what did they find there?
Finding major destruction layers and reoccupation phases there, along with cuneiform tablets, which are ancient administrative records, proves that the Israelites were up against highly organized, literate, formidable urban centers.
So the enemy wasn't just some localized myth.
No, it was an entrenched bureaucratic state.
Okay, so we have the setting. A fractured people living in the hills, surrounded by superior military technology, clinging to a tribal identity.
A very precarious situation.
But to understand why they keep getting crushed, we need to look at the literary framework of the book itself. The author doesn't just hand us a timeline. They trap these characters in a terrifying loop.
Yes, the structure is incredibly deliberate. The academic term used here in the research is a Deuteronomistic editorial.
Okay, let's unpack that for the listener. What does that actually mean?
Well, to explain it without getting bogged down in jargon, the editors who compiled this book, likely centuries later during the Babylonian exile, weren't just passing along fun campfire stories.
Right.
They were deeply traumatized refugees looking back at their history. And they were applying the strict covenant logic found in the book of Deuteronomy to answer one burning question.
Which was?
Why are we in exile? Why did our society completely disintegrate?
So they're basically performing an autopsy on their own nation.
Exactly. An autopsy of their covenant failure.
And the macro structure they use is fascinating. You have the introduction, which acts as the medical diagnosis.
The root cause.
Then you have the core of the book, which we'll call the cycles of the judges.
Sure.
And finally, you have the appendices, which are pure, unfiltered horror stories of internal collapse.
Yes, it gets very dark at the end.
Let's look at that cycle first, because it's the engine that drives the whole narrative. It's a predictable, tragic sequence.
Very predictable.
Yeah.
It goes sin, oppression, the people cry out, God raises a deliverer, a shaphe, they get a period of rest, and then a massive relapse.
But it's vital to understand that this isn't a flat circle.
No, not at all.
It is a downward spiral. Every time they relapse, they drop lower than the generation before.
That's a crucial point.
Yeah.
The diagnosis for this disease is actually laid out right away in chapter 2 in a theological prologue at a place called Bochum.
Okay.
The text describes an angel of Yahweh showing up to deliver what is essentially a formal breach of contract lawsuit.
Right. The angel recounts the history. He says, I brought you out of Egypt. I kept my end of the covenant. I told you not to make treaties with the people of this land, not to bow to their altars, but you didn't listen. So the failure to secure the land wasn't a lack of military strategy or failure of the supply chain. It was a theological compromise. They chose to coexist.
They did. And that coexistence led to something called syncretism.
I want to camp out on that word for a minute, syncretism. It gets thrown around in academic papers, but what did that actually look like for an Israelite farmer on a Tuesday?
That's the real question.
Were they just straight up abandoning God and becoming atheists?
No, ancient people were rarely atheists. Syncretism is much more insidious than that. It is hedging your bets.
Hedging your bets. Give me an example.
Imagine you're a subsistence farmer in the highlands. Your entire family's survival depends on the seasonal rains. You worship Yahweh, the God who delivered you from Egypt.
Sure.
But your Canaanite neighbors tell you that Baal is the God who specifically controls the storm clouds and the fertility of the soil. So what do?
You pray to Yahweh, but you also leave a little grain out for Baal, just in case.
Precisely. It was a messy, localized mixing of beliefs. You still claim Yahweh as your national God, but right alongside that confession, you have an Asherah pole in your backyard.
Wow.
You have teraphim small household idols sitting on your mantle. It was an improvisational, consumer-driven religion.
But hold on, I have to push back here.
Go ahead.
The text explicitly claims that God deliberately left these enemy nations in the land to test Israel. It says he left them there to see whether Israel would keep the way of the Lord.
Yes, it does say that.
To a modern ear, that sounds incredibly manipulative. It sounds like entrapment. You are taking a recovering addict, locking them in a room full of their worst vices, and saying, let's see what happens. Why would a benevolent God do that?
I completely understand why it reads that way today. But we have to look at this through the covenant logic of the ancient Near East.
Okay, what does that logic look like?
In that framework,
Mhm.
blessing and curse are not arbitrary magic spells God casts from the sky. They are the natural, historical realities of the choices you make.
So the testing isn't a game.
No, the testing isn't a psychological game. It is a disciplined exposure to the consequences of their own compromise.
Like letting them touch the hot stove.
Exactly. God is essentially saying, if you choose to worship the gods of the Canaanites, if you embrace their value system, then I will allow you to experience the full weight of the Canaanite political and economic systems.
Oh, I see.
Their unaddressed spiritual disobedience manifests as institutional oppression.
Okay, that makes sense. It's the realization that you can't adopt the culture of the empire without eventually becoming enslaved by the empire.
Beautifully stated.
And that oppression leads to the people crying out, which finally brings us to the deliverers themselves, the shuftim.
The judges.
Right. But God's method of rescue here completely defies every military textbook ever written. We get this parade of incredibly unlikely leaders.
We really do. The narrative sets a baseline with Othniel first.
Othniel's kind of the standard, right?
Yes. He is Caleb's nephew from the prestigious tribe of Judah. He is faithful. He fights the battle. He wins. It's straightforward.
Nothing crazy.
Right. But almost immediately after Othniel, the author throws the standard playbook out the window and introduces massive irony and reversal.
Enter Ehud.
Ehud.
The text introduces Ehud by making a very specific point. He is a Benjaminite, and he is left-handed. Now, at this time, Israel is being oppressed by Eglon, the king of Moab.
Right, a heavy oppression.
And the author adds a darkly comedic detail here, noting that Eglon is a remarkably fat man. But let's look at the left-handed detail. That isn't just a biographical fun fact, is it?
Not at all. It is a tactical masterstroke. To understand why, you have to understand the sheer humiliation of the ancient tribute system.
Okay, tell me about that.
Israel is being forced to send emissaries to Moab to hand over their hard-earned wealth just to avoid being slaughtered. It is a deeply degrading process.
I can imagine.
When you approach a foreign king, the guards search you. In a predominantly right-handed world, a soldier draws his sword from his left hip across his body, so the guards always check the left side.
But Ehud straps a custom-made, double-edged dagger to his right thigh. He goes through the security checkpoint, pays the humiliating tribute, and then turns back. He tells King Eglon, "I have a secret message for you, O king."
And Eglon bites.
He does. Eglon dismisses his guards, expecting some kind of political intelligence or maybe a bribe.
And then, in absolute privacy, Ehud reaches with his left hand, draws the hidden weapon, and assassinates the king in a scene that the text describes with visceral, gruesome detail.
It's incredibly graphic.
It is an act of sheer deception and brutal violence, but it completely decapitates the Moabite leadership and sparks a massive military victory for Israel.
It's shocking. And right after that, we get a single verse about a guy named Shamgar who strikes down 600 Philistines with an ox goad.
Just an ox goad.
Think about the technological disparity we talked about earlier. The Philistines have iron weapons and chariots, and this guy uses a farming stick used to prod cattle, and he wins.
It's absurd in the best way.
But if Ehud and Shamgar subvert military expectations, the story of Deborah and Barak takes a sledgehammer to the entire social order of the ancient world.
It really does. The ancient Near East was intensely patriarchal.
Right.
The military complex was built entirely on male honor, martial prowess, and glory in battle. But Chapter 4 introduces Deborah.
A female judge.
Yes, she is a female prophet and a judge. She isn't hiding either. She is publicly holding court under the palm of Deborah in the hill country of Ephraim, and the people are flocking to her for wisdom and dispute resolution.
And she summons Barak, who is supposed to be the great military commander. She tells him that Yahweh has commanded him to march on Mount Tabor with 10,000 men to face Sisera.
Sisera is terrifying, by the way.
Yeah, Sisera is the commander of the Canaanite army under King Javan of Hazor, the very city we talked about earlier with the cuneiform tablets and the massive infrastructure.
Exactly, the bureaucratic state. And Barak hesitates.
He does.
He looks at Deborah and says, "If you will go with me, I will go. But if you will not go with me, I will not go." His passivity is stark.
It's kind of embarrassing for him.
It is. He is demanding the presence of the female prophet as a talisman, a good luck charm, because he lacks confidence in the divine command.
Deborah agrees to go, but she tells him flat out, "The glory of this campaign will not be yours. Yahweh is going to sell Sisera into the hand of a woman."
Now, Barak probably assumes she means herself.
Right, but the text pulls off a stunning bait and switch.
The battle begins. The Canaanite army deploys 900 chariots of iron. It is an overwhelming, terrifying technological advantage.
900 chariots.
But the text says Yahweh routed Sisera and his chariots. There's a massive panic, likely a flash flood in the wadi that bogs down the heavy iron chariots in the mud.
Nature turns against them.
Sisera abandons his troops, leaps from his chariot, and flees on foot.
He runs until he finds the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite. Now, the Kenites had a peace treaty with the king of Hazor, so Sisera thinks, "Perfect, I'm safe."
He thinks he's found a sanctuary.
Jael comes out, invites him in, and treats him like an honored guest. He asks for water. She gives him milk to make him drowsy. She covers him with a rug and tells him to rest.
Which is deeply significant. In the ancient honor-shame culture, the laws of hospitality were sacred.
Right.
Once you were under someone's roof and it consumed their food, you were under their absolute protection. Sisera falls into a deep sleep of exhaustion, fully believing he is secure.
And then comes one of the most brutal moments in all of ancient literature. Jael creeps up to him quietly. She doesn't have a sword.
No sword.
She takes what she has, a tent peg and a mallet. And with one strike, she drives the wooden peg straight through the temple of the sleeping general, pinning his head to the ground.
It is the ultimate subversion of power.
It's mind-blowing.
The mighty, ironclad Canaanite general, the terror of the highlands, is assassinated by a marginalized, non-Israelite woman using domestic camping equipment.
The theological point being made here is absolutely critical, though.
It is. The Hebrew words used throughout these narratives for deliverance, words like Hitzel and Yasha, they belong entirely and exclusively to Yahweh.
Meaning God is actively mocking the patriarchal elite. He is showing that human credentials, having a king, having an iron chariot, being a famous male warrior, mean absolutely nothing.
They are irrelevant.
The text points out that the Spirit of the Lord, the Ruah YHWH, empowers who he chooses. God uses a left-handed assassin, a reluctant commander, a female judge, and a woman with a tent peg to liberate a nation.
And they celebrate this in chapter 5 with the Song of Deborah, which scholars recognize as one of the oldest preserved pieces of Hebrew poetry in existence.
Oh, wow.
It's a raw, visceral victory song that celebrates Yahweh as a divine warrior while simultaneously calling out the cowardice of the Israelite tribes who stayed home and refused to fight. It's a high point in the book.
But this methodology, using incredibly flawed, unlikely heroes, has a dark side. It works when the deliverer acknowledges that the power comes from God. But what happens when the guy with the tent peg or the guy with the ox goad starts to think they are the source of the power? What happens when success gets detached from covenant faithfulness?
That is the danger.
And that brings us to a massive turning point in the manuscript, the pivot to compromise, focusing on Gideon and Jephthah.
Yes. Up until this point, the judges have been rough around the edges, but generally faithful to the mission.
Right. They get the job done.
But Gideon's story, spanning chapters 6 through 8, is where the downward spiral really begins to accelerate into something unrecognizable.
We first meet Gideon hiding in a wine press. He is secretly threshing wheat down in a pit so the Midianites won't see him and steal his food.
It is a portrait of severe economic devastation and sheer terror.
Yeah. The angel of the Lord appears to this terrified farmer in a hole and says, "The Lord is with you, O mighty man of valor." The sarcasm almost drips off the page.
It really does. And Gideon is incredibly cynical. He essentially says, if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened? Where are all the miracles our ancestors told us about?
He wants proof.
He demands signs. He lays out a fleece to test God not once, but twice, demanding that dew fall only on the fleece and then only on the ground. It is hesitation bordering on unbelief.
But God is patient. God tells Gideon to go tear down his father's altar to Baal and the Asherah pole beside it.
Which brings us right back to that syncretism.
Exactly. Gideon's own family is running the local pagan franchise.
And Gideon does tear it down, though he does it at night because he's afraid of his neighbors.
Still so timid.
Right. Eventually, he manages to gather a massive coalition army, 32,000 men. But Yahweh does something completely counterintuitive. He tells Gideon, you have too many men.
I love this scene. The Midianites look like a swarm of locusts in the valley, and God starts mathematically reducing Gideon's army.
It's brilliant.
First, anyone who's afraid is allowed to leave. 22,000 guys walk off the battlefield. Gideon is left with 10,000. God says, still too many.
Still too many.
He takes them to the water to drink and separates them based on how they lap the water. Gideon is left with just 300 men.
And the author gives us the exact theological reasoning for this bizarre military tactic.
Which is?
God says, lest Israel boast over me, saying, my own hand has saved me. The victory has to be mathematically impossible so that no human being can take the credit.
That makes total sense.
They attack the camp at night, using only trumpets, empty clay jars, and torches inside the jars. The psychological warfare causes the Midianites to panic and slaughter each other in the dark.
The victory is absolute, but the aftermath is where the cancer really shows up. The men of Israel come to Gideon and say, rule over us, you and your son and your grandson, for you have saved us.
They want a dynasty.
They want a king. Gideon gives the perfect theological Sunday school answer. He says, I will not rule over you, and my son will not rule over you. Yahweh will rule over you.
But his words are completely disconnected from his actions. This is the tragic pivot.
What does he do?
Immediately after saying God is the only king, Gideon says, but let me ask a request of you. Every man of you give me the earrings from his spoil. They throw down massive amounts of gold. And Gideon takes that gold and manufactures an ephod.
Break that down. What is an ephod, and why does making one out of gold ruin his entire legacy?
Well, an ephod was originally a linen garment worn by the high priest, often containing the Urim and Thummim used to discern God's will.
Okay, so it's a sacred garment.
Yes, and it belonged in the central sanctuary, under the authority of the designated priesthood. By making a magnificent golden ephod and setting it up in his own hometown of Ophrah, Gideon is essentially creating a rival, localized cult center.
He's making his own religion.
He is hijacking the religious authority for his own family's prestige.
The text says, all Israel whored after it there, and it became a snare to Gideon and to his family. He said he didn't want to be king, but he took on a royal harem. He accumulated massive wealth.
And the name he chose for his son.
Oh, right. He named his son Abimelech, which literally translates to, my father is king.
He institutionalized a new form of idolatry, and the fallout is immediate and devastating.
Let's talk about Abimelech.
In chapter 9, that son, Abimelech, launches a bloody, unauthorized bid for power. He hires mercenaries, goes to his father's house, and slaughters his own brothers, 70 of them, on a single stone.
70 brothers.
Yes, Abimelech becomes a self-made tyrant. His brief reign is nothing but civil war, betrayal, and death. It proves that ambition without covenant accountability is just organized murder.
And if Gideon shows how subtle the corruption can be, the next major judge, Jephthah, shows what happens when the spiritual rot becomes complete.
Jephthah's story is incredibly grim.
His story in chapters 11 and 12 is arguably one of the most heartbreaking in the entire Bible.
Jephthah is a product of this broken society. He is the son of a prostitute. His half-brothers forcibly exile him so he won't get any share of the family inheritance.
So he's completely cut off.
He is stripped of his clan identity, which, as we discussed with the four-room houses, is equivalent to a death sentence in this culture. He flees to the fringes, to the land of Tob, and becomes a warlord.
Oh.
Yeah, the text says he gathers worthless fellows around him. He's essentially running a mafia outfit on the frontier.
But then the Ammonites attack the region of Gilead. The elders of Gilead realize their formal military is useless, so they go crawling to the outcast gang leader.
They are desperate.
They beg Jephthah to come back and be their commander. Jephthah essentially negotiates a contract. If I fight for you and win, I become your permanent head. He is entirely transactional.
Very transactional.
And he brings that exact transactional mindset into his relationship with God.
This is the crux of the tragedy. Jephthah has spent his life on the fringes, absorbing the religious mechanics of the surrounding pagan nations.
Right.
As he marches out to face the Ammonites, the text says the Spirit of the Lord comes upon him. He already has the divine empowerment, but he doesn't trust it.
He feels like he needs to do more.
He feels the need to bribe God to ensure the victory.
So he makes this horrific vow. He says, if you will give the Ammonites into my hand, then whatever comes out from the doors of my house to meet me when I return in peace, I will offer it up for a burnt offering.
It's such a reckless vow.
He wins the battle, he comes home, and the first person to walk out of his house to greet him is his only child, his daughter, dancing with tambourines to celebrate his victory.
It is a devastating moment. He tears his clothes and blames her, saying, "Alas, my daughter, you have brought me very low, for I have opened my mouth to the Lord, and I cannot take back my vow."
Okay, let me stop you there because people debate this constantly. Did he actually sacrifice his daughter?
I know there's debate, yes.
I've heard commentators try to soften this by saying he just dedicated her to a life of virginity at the tabernacle like a nun.
Yeah.
Does the manuscript support that?
The manuscript addresses this directly, and the academic consensus is grim. While people throughout history have tried to soften the text because the implications are so repulsive.
Understandably.
The plain linguistic and contextual reading of chapter 11 points to a literal human sacrifice. The author is not presenting Jephthah as a noble man making a hard choice.
No.
No, the text frames it as a catastrophic, ignorant failure.
He treats Yahweh like Shamash or Molech pagan gods who demanded child sacrifice to secure military favor.
Exactly.
He is so trapped in this toxic honor-shame dynamic that he believes breaking a foolish vow to God is worse than murdering his own child. It is the ultimate proof that zeal without theological wisdom will destroy your family.
And it destroys the nation, too. Because immediately after he murders his daughter, the men of the tribe of Ephraim cross the river.
Why? What do they want?
They are deeply offended that they weren't invited to fight the Ammonites and share in the glory. They threatened to burn Jephthah's house down.
Seriously, over pride.
Over pride. And Jephthah, unlike earlier judges who used diplomacy to calm tribal tensions, just unleashes his army on his own countrymen.
It's a full-blown civil war. They secure the shallow crossings of the Jordan River. When a survivor tries to cross, they ask him to pronounce the word shibboleth.
Such a chilling detail.
The Ephraimites have a regional accent and can only say Sibboleth. Based purely on how they pronounce a single consonant, 42,000 Israelites are slaughtered by their own brothers.
42,000.
The fragmentation is complete. The deliverers are now butchering their own people.
The baseline has dropped so far that it's hard to recognize Israel as a covenant people anymore, which prepares us for the final judge in the cycle.
A man who shatters the mold entirely.
Yes, a man who possesses absolute superhuman physical strength but zero moral compass. Samson.
Chapters 13 through 16. The story of Samson is the story of a man who has everything and throws it all away.
That's a perfect summary.
It starts with this incredible, miraculous birth annunciation. An angel appears to a barren woman and tells her she will have a son and he must be a Nazir, a Nazirite, from the womb. Let's unpack the Nazirite vow. What does that require?
Usually, a Nazirite vow was a temporary, voluntary period of intense religious consecration. You were essentially living like a priest for a specific amount of time.
Okay, so there were rules.
Very strict rules. You could never cut your hair, you could never touch a dead body, and you were forbidden from consuming any product of the grapevine. No wine, no fresh grapes, no raisins.
But Samson doesn't choose this, right?
No, he is drafted into it from conception. He is explicitly set apart by God to begin delivering Israel from the Philistines.
And God gives him immense supernatural physical strength to accomplish this. But here's the paradox. From the moment Samson becomes an adult, his entire life is a middle finger to his calling.
It really is.
He is driven by nothing but pure lust, ego, and impulsivity. The very first thing he does is see a Philistine woman in Timnah and demands his parents arrange a marriage. He says, "Get her for me, for she is right in my eyes."
Right in my eyes. That phrase should send chills down the spine of anyone reading Judges,
Why is that so significant?
because it is the defining motif of the book's collapse. Samson's life is a masterclass in squandered potential. He repeatedly and casually breaks his vows.
He kills a lion with his bare hands, then later walks past the carcass, sees bees have made a hive in it, and scoops out the honey to eat. That's touching a dead body. Vow broken.
And it gets worse. He goes to Timnah for his wedding feast. The Hebrew word used there strongly implies a drinking banquet.
Oh, so he's drinking.
He is fraternizing with the enemy and almost certainly consuming wine. Vow broken again. He plays arrogant riddles with his Philistine groomsmen, gets betrayed by his new wife, and flies into a rage.
It's like someone handed a teenager the keys to a multi-million-dollar Formula One race car, but instead of driving it in a Grand Prix, he's using it to do donuts in a grocery store parking lot and smashing into parked cars.
That is exactly what it's like.
He has this unbelievable divine horsepower, but absolutely no steering wheel. He ties torches to the tails of 300 foxes to burn down the Philistine grain fields just because he's mad about a girl.
Pure spite.
He slaughters 1,000 men with the fresh jawbone of a donkey. It's chaotic, narcissistic violence.
But the uncomfortable theological reality is that God uses him anyway. The text repeatedly states that the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him in these moments.
So God is okay with his behavior.
No, the author is drawing a sharp, terrifying distinction here. Giftedness is not the same thing as holiness. Charisma does not equal character.
Wow, that's powerful.
God is sovereignly using Samson's petty vendettas to disrupt the Philistine oppression, but he is absolutely not endorsing Samson's morality.
That is such a vital distinction. Samson functions as a walking, breathing metaphor for the nation of Israel itself. Think about it.
It's very parallel.
Israel was uniquely set apart by God from birth. They were given miraculous gifts and victories, but instead of remaining faithful, they're constantly running after foreign lovers.
Exactly.
They keep playing with fire, and just like Israel, Samson's compromises eventually catch up to him.
It culminates with Delilah in the Valley of Sorek. He falls in love with her, and the Philistine lords bribe her with an astronomical sum of silver to find the secret of his strength.
And he just plays along.
Samson toys with her. He lies to her 3 times about how he can be bound. He is arrogant. He thinks he can live right on the edge of the cliff without falling over.
But she wears him down. Day after day, she nags him until his soul is vexed to death, and he finally tells her the truth. The long hair isn't magic. It is the final remaining symbol of his Nazirite vow.
It is the last thread connecting him to his consecration.
She lulls him to sleep, calls in a man to shave his head, and the text delivers one of the saddest sentences in the Bible. He awoke from his sleep and thought, "I will go out as before and shake myself free," but he did not know that the Lord had left him.
The physical blinding that follows is just an outward manifestation of the spiritual blindness he has lived with his entire life.
The Philistines gouge out his eyes, bind him in bronze shackles, and hook him up to a grinding mill in a Gaza prison. The strongest man in the world is reduced to a draft animal, providing grain for the enemy.
His final act in chapter 16 is devastating. The Philistines throw a massive religious festival to celebrate their god, Dagon, claiming Dagon defeated Yahweh by delivering Samson to them.
So it's a huge mockery.
Total mockery. They bring the blind, broken Samson out to the temple to entertain them, to be a clown. He asks a servant to guide his hands to the central load-bearing pillars of the temple.
He prays one final time, "O Lord God, please remember me, and please strengthen me only this once, that I may be avenged on the Philistines for my 2 eyes."
Notice the motive.
Yeah, even in his final prayer, it is still mostly about personal revenge. He pushes the pillars apart, the roof collapses, and he brings the entire massive structure down on himself and 3,000 Philistine lords and elites.
The author notes that he killed more in his death than he did in his life. It is a deliverance, technically.
Technically, yeah.
The Philistine leadership is decimated, which eases the pressure on Israel. But it is deliverance through complete self-destruction.
And this brings us to a terrifying sociological realization. If the absolute best among them, the divinely chosen judge and deliverer, is a violently impulsive, morally bankrupt strongman who dies under the rubble of his own mistakes, what on earth does the average citizen look like?
Exactly, and that horrific question launches us into the appendices of the book, chapters 17 through 21.
The timeline stops here, doesn't it?
Yes, the chronological timeline of the judges is paused here. We aren't talking about foreign oppressors anymore. There are no Philistines or Moabites to blame in this section.
So what is it about?
This is purely about internal domestic rot.
The refrain that echoes through these final chapters is the diagnosis of the disease. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. We are about to see what absolute moral autonomy looks like in practice.
It starts in chapter 17, seemingly small, with a man named Micah living in the hill country of Ephraim.
Okay, what does Micah do?
Micah steals 1,100 pieces of silver from his own mother. He eventually gets scared of a curse she pronounced and returns the money.
And how does his mother react? She doesn't discipline him. She says, "Blessed be my son by Yahweh," and she takes a portion of that stolen silver and hires a silversmith to make a carved image and a metal idol.
It is the ultimate absurd picture of religious consumerism. Micah takes these idols and builds a private shrine in his house. He manufactures an ephod. He gathers household gods.
It's like a DIY religion.
It really is. He initially just appoints his own son as a priest, but then a wandering Levite from Bethlehem happens to pass by.
And Levites were important.
Very important. Levites were supposed to be the designated ministers of Yahweh's covenant, scattered among the tribes to teach the law.
But this Levite is just a drifter looking for a gig. Micah offers him a contract, 10 pieces of silver a year, a suit of clothes, and room and board. The Levite agrees.
And Micah sits back and says, "Now I know that Yahweh will prosper me because I have a Levite as priest."
He believes he has successfully purchased the divine blessing. He has a customized, highly localized religion that demands absolutely no moral obedience, but provides the psychological comfort of institutional legitimacy.
But the text shows us how quickly private corruption scales into national disaster.
Right. In chapter 18, the entire tribe of Dan is migrating north. They failed to secure their allotted territory in the south, so they are acting as heavily armed vagabonds.
Just wandering mercenaries, basically.
600 Danite warriors pass by Micah's house. They see the shrine, they see the hired Levite, and they simply use their superior force to steal the entire religious operation. They take the silver idols, the ephod, the teraphim.
Then they offer the Levite a corporate promotion. They say, "Is it better for you to be priest to the house of one man or to be priest to a tribe and clan in Israel?"
So they bribe him.
The Levite doesn't hesitate. He takes the stolen idols and joins the mob. The Danites march up to a peaceful, unsuspecting, isolated city called Laish.
And what happens to Laisha?
They butcher the inhabitants, burn the city, rebuild it, and set up Micah's stolen idols as the official cult center for their tribe.
Let's track the math here. A mother's failure to discipline her son over stolen money leads to a household idol. That household idol is legitimized by a corrupt priest.
Yes.
That corrupt priest is bought out by a desperate tribe. And that desperate tribe commits a genocide to establish an idolatrous headquarters that will plague Israel for centuries. Sin scales rapidly.
It does. But as dark as that is, chapters 19 through 21 take us into the deepest, blackest abyss of human depravity recorded in ancient texts.
When reading this section, we have to approach it with incredible pastoral seriousness, right?
Yes. The survey manuscript emphasizes this heavily. This narrative deals directly with sexual assault, trauma, the abuse of women, and the total unmitigated breakdown of human dignity.
It is a profoundly disturbing text.
We meet another Levite. He lives in the remote hill country of Ephraim and has taken a concubine from Bethlehem. Things go sour. She leaves him and returns to her father's house.
After 4 months, the Levite travels to Bethlehem to speak kindly to her and bring her back. After several days of drinking and feasting with his father-in-law, they begin the journey north.
As night falls, they are near the city of Jebus, which is Jerusalem, but the Levite refuses to stay in a city of foreigners.
He insists on pressing on to Gibeah, which belongs to the Israelite tribe of Benjamin.
He believes he will be safe among his own covenant brothers, but when they arrive in the town square of Gibeah, no one offers them a place to stay.
Which is a huge red flag.
The foundational ancient law of hospitality is completely ignored. Finally, an old man coming in from the fields sees them and begs them to come to his house, warning them not to spend the night in the square.
They go to the old man's house, they wash their feet, they eat, they drink, and then the men of the city, the text calls them worthless fellows, surround the house.
They pound on the door.
They shout to the old man, "Bring out the man who came into your house, that we may know him," meaning they intend to violently gang rape the Levite.
It is a deliberate, terrifying echo of the story of Sodom and Gomorrah from Genesis 19. The author is flashing a massive warning light, signaling that the Israelites have become indistinguishable from the most notoriously wicked pagan cities in their history.
The social code is completely inverted.
The old man goes out and pleads with them. He says, "No, my brothers, do not act so wickedly." But then he offers a compromise that makes my blood run cold.
What does he say?
He offers to throw his own virgin daughter and the Levite's concubine out to the mob instead, telling them to do with the women whatever seems good to them, just to spare the male guest.
It is repulsive.
It exposes the absolute bottom of a degraded patriarchal society. When the mob refuses to listen, the Levite takes matters into his own hands.
To save his own skin, he grabs his concubine and physically thrusts her out the door to the men. The text is stark and unforgiving in its description.
It is.
It says they knew her and abused her all night until the morning.
When dawn breaks, they let her go. She crawls back to the house and collapses at the threshold, her hands resting on the step.
And the Levite's reaction.
When the Levite opens the door in the morning, ready to leave, he looks down at her and says, "Get up, let us be going."
There is no empathy, no horror, just cold, callous demand. But there is no answer. She is dead.
What follows is the weaponization of her tragedy. The Levite takes her body home, takes a knife, and cuts her corpse into 12 pieces.
He dismembers her.
He sends one piece to every tribe throughout the borders of Israel. It is a grotesque, mafia-style summons to war. He incites massive outrage, claiming he was wronged, conveniently leaving out the part where he was the one who threw her to the wolves.
I have to ask the question that every listener is thinking right now. Why is this in the Bible?
It's a very fair question.
Why end a supposedly sacred holy book with a horror story about the abuse and murder of a woman orchestrated by religious leaders, followed by a retaliatory civil war? What is the point of putting this on record?
Because the biblical authors refuse to gloss over the reality of human depravity. This text is offering a scathing sociological critique of a society that has abandoned its moral foundation.
Okay, break that down for me.
The world of Judges was built on kinship and covenant. The story of the Levite's concubine graphically demonstrates what happens when that covenant breaks down.
When everyone does what is right in their own eyes.
Exactly. When the vulnerable become expendable, when religious leaders will sacrifice women to save themselves, when hospitality is replaced by mob violence, the social order doesn't just bend, it completely shatters.
It is holding up a mirror to the horror of absolute autonomy.
And the resulting fallout proves your point. The other 11 tribes gather a massive army and demand that the tribe of Benjamin hand over the guilty men of Gibeah.
But Benjamin refuses out of tribal pride. A brutal civil war erupts. After several days of massive casualties on both sides, the coalition army completely routs Benjamin.
They burn their cities to the ground.
And they slaughter every man, woman, and child they can find until only 600 Benjaminite soldiers are left hiding in the wilderness.
And it's in the aftermath, in chapter 21, that we see the final sickening irony of a society trying to fix a moral catastrophe using the exact same logic that caused it.
The Israelites gather at Bethel and start weeping. They realize they have nearly wiped out one of their own 12 tribes.
But there's a problem. Before the war, they made a rash, religiously binding oath that none of them would give their daughters in marriage to a Benjaminite.
So how do they fix this oath management crisis and save the tribe of Benjamin from extinction? Diplomacy, repentance.
No, through further violence and coordinated mass kidnapping.
It's unbelievable.
They realized that the city of Jabesh-Gilead didn't send anyone to the coalition army. So they sent 12,000 elite soldiers to massacre the entire population of Jabesh-Gilead men, women, and children.
Saving only 400 young virgins, whom they forcibly hand over to the surviving Benjaminites.
But wait, the math doesn't work out. They have 600 Benjaminites and only 400 kidnapped girls. They're still 200 short.
So what is their next brilliant solution?
They instruct the remaining Benjaminites to go hide in the vineyards near Shiloh during an annual religious festival.
Oh, no.
When the young women of Shiloh come out to dance in the dances, the men are told to leap out, ambush them, kidnap a wife for themselves, and carry them off to the land of Benjamin.
It is institutionalized abduction. They are covering up the consequences of a civil war, which was caused by an institutionalized assault by sanctioning more mass assaults.
It is absolute blinding madness. The moral compass isn't just broken, it has been completely pulverized.
And that is exactly where the narrator drops the curtain. The final verse of the book, Judges 21:25, acts as an epitaph for the entire era. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes.
It is the ultimate proof that a society without shared transcendent truth, governed only by subjective personal desires, inevitably devolves into profound social injustice and violence against the vulnerable.
Wow. We have covered a massive amount of historical and textual ground. This brings us to the big picture. When we step back from the blood and the chaos, what does all of this mean?
Well, the book is desperately screaming for a solution.
That repeated refrain, "in those days there was no king in Israel," is clearly a deliberate editorial setup preparing the reader for the books of Samuel and the rise of the monarchy.
Yes, let's look at the redemptive historical arc that the academic manuscript outlines. If you trace the biblical narrative from Genesis to Revelation, Judges occupies a crucial, sobering space.
Genesis gives the promise of a land and a blessing. Exodus through Deuteronomy establishes the covenant laws. Joshua is the entry into the land.
And Judges is the spectacular failure. It proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that simply possessing the right geography or having the right constitution or getting veiled out by occasional charismatic leaders is not enough to sustain a just society.
The fundamental human problem isn't just political disorganization or a lack of technology. The problem is deep-seated, chronic rebellion within the human heart.
Which brings us to how the rest of the Bible interprets Judges, specifically the Christological perspective. Judges points to the ultimate hope, not by providing a perfect hero, but by showing exactly what is lacking.
Every single judge, Othniel, Ehud, Deborah, Gideon, Jephthah, Samson, they are all partial, deeply flawed shadows.
Right, they might achieve a temporary military rescue, but their moral compromises and their inevitable deaths leave the people worse off than before.
They create a profound longing for a deliverer who doesn't fail. Now, it is interesting that the New Testament, specifically in Hebrews chapter 11, actually includes Gideon, Barak, Samson, and Jephthah in its famous Hall of Faith.
It remembers them for the brief moments when they actually did trust God against impossible odds.
But the larger claim of the biblical canon is that these men and women were just stopgaps. Judges points to the absolute necessity of a Messiah, a king who perfectly unites righteous rule, personal holiness, and permanent deliverance.
And if we pull this forward to today, the contemporary relevance of this ancient Iron Age document is astonishing. We might look at the ancient settings, the chariots, the shrines, the four-room houses, and think this has nothing to do with modern life.
But the sociology and the theology at play here are incredibly current.
Absolutely.
Let me put it this way. This text is a blazing warning siren for modern culture. We live in an era where you do you and live your truth are championed as the highest possible virtues.
Yes, very true.
But Judges tells us that when moral autonomy, doing what is right in your own eyes, becomes the highest law of the land, the end result is not a utopian society of free thinkers. The result is fragmentation, tribalism, and the brutal exploitation of the weak.
Exactly. It forces an honest diagnosis of human nature. The book is a sharp critique of religious consumerism.
Like Micah's shrine.
Right. We might not have silver idols on our mantle like Micah, but we absolutely try to customize our spirituality to demand nothing of us while promising to bless our ambitions.
Wow!
Yes, and more Judges exposes the incredibly dangerous false belief that simply finding a strong leader will fix a cultural collapse.
That is such a vital point. The Israelites wanted Gideon to be their king because he was a military genius. They accepted Abimelech's tyranny because he projected strength.
They tolerated Samson's chaotic violence because he was physically unstoppable.
They thought pure authority was the answer. But Judges shows that authority without covenant fidelity is a wrecking ball. Charisma without character destroys the very people it is supposed to lead.
The problem was never just out there with the Philistines or the Midianites. The problem was in here, in the disordered, compromised hearts of the Israelites themselves.
That makes Judges a profound text for public ethics, constantly challenging us on how we manage power and how our society treats the most vulnerable among us.
It really does.
So as we finally wrap up this intense deep dive, what is the ultimate takeaway? Despite the relentless cycle of rebellion, the idolatry, the civil wars, and the staggering moral failures, there is an overarching theological theme that we cannot miss. It is the persistent, stubborn mercy of God.
The Hebrew concept of Her's covenant loyalty, steadfast love. It operates silently in the background of all this chaos.
God's grace persists under conditions of absolute, infuriating failure. He continues to answer their cries when they are oppressed, even when he knows they're just going to sabotage themselves again 5 minutes later.
He uses deeply broken, unlikely people to accomplish his purposes. It is a theology of grace in the absolute dark.
It proves that God's faithfulness is not dependent on human perfection. He remains steadfast even when his people are entirely unfaithful.
That is the hope at the core of it all.
But I want to leave you with a final provocative thought. You asked us to look at how a society unravels, and we've spent this whole time analyzing how Israel spiraled into anarchy because they didn't have a centralized leader.
The whole "no king in Israel" refrain.
Exactly. It perfectly sets you up to think that a monarchy, a strong, centralized government, is the ultimate solution to the human condition. But if you keep reading the historical texts, if you move into the books of Samuel and Kings, eventually Israel gets exactly what they wanted.
They do?
They get kings, they get Saul, they get David, they get Solomon, they get a secure border, a standing army, and massive institutional power. And guess what?
The kings fail too.
They fail spectacularly. The kings fall into the exact same idolatry. The covenant still fractures. The unified kingdom eventually splits into two warring nations, and they end up conquered and exiled anyway.
It's a tragic cycle on a larger scale.
It forces you to ask a terrifying question. If getting exactly what you think you need, the perfect government structure, the right economic policies, the strong leader, still doesn't stop the human heart from drifting toward what is right in its own eyes, then what exactly is the cure for human nature?
If changing the leadership at the top doesn't fix a foundation that is turned to dust, where do you look for rescue?
That is the enduring, unsettling question that the Book of Judges leaves us wrestling with.
It really is.
Keep digging into your sources, keep asking the hard questions, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.